Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
All right, we are continuing with our player evaluation series. Joining me today, Jim Fox. How are you doing today, Jim?
Jesse, we're doing this on a regular basis.
Yeah, well, this I think will probably be the last one.
Okay.
Because we're getting closer to the draft, and that means we're getting closer to the end of the Stanley Cup Final. And I wasn't planning on talking about it a lot, but I need you to talk me off a ledge after watching Game 3 last night. As we're recording this the morning of June 10th. Game 3 was played last night, June 9th. And listen, it's, every team's fan base watches the final, I suspect, and goes, could my team have hung with one of these two teams?
Uh-huh.
Watching Game 3 last night, and I understand that a lot of this is just recency bias. A lot of this is just me reacting to one game. But I couldn't see any of the other 30 teams in the NHL hanging in that game last night because of the physicality and the skill, the combination of the two elements. And I thought, have we built a league where two teams have cornered the market on that type of player? Does the league just have enough guys like that left to spread around multiple teams?
No, I mean, that's where salary cut comes in, right? That's where it makes you get rid of guys and spreads it around, and everyone gets a chance and everyone gets a crack at those types of players. So that's where we are. I mean, the way I look at it again, the pit in my stomach is no Ekholm.
Mm-hmm.
Frederick injured. Kane coming back, just playing, after a long time off. We had to take advantage of that situation. Completely healthy, maybe Edmonton would have finished ahead of the Kings in the regular season, and it wouldn't be as much of an argument or a negative or a bad feeling. But the opportunity was there. It was presented. And unfortunately, the Kings did not capitalize on that. And that's what makes it hurt even more. But no, I understand what you're saying. You heard the comments after the first two games, right? I mean, everyone was saying these are the two best games to start a series ever, like in the Stanley Cup Final. So you could argue that. You could talk about it. I'm sure there's some comparables out there, but it was high quality. And that's where these teams are now. And you're right that it's a great combination of size and skill. And, remember when the Kings won, right? It was we were big and we overpowered and we wore down teams. And then there was that change. But, you got to get quicker and faster. Yes. But the teams that win are still big.
Mm-hmm.
Bigger than most.
Last year, there were the predictable comparisons of the Florida Panthers to the 2012 Kings teams. And I always bristle when people compare anybody to the 2012 Kings team because that 2012 Kings team was just such a unexpected shot out of the blue, and they really did just dominate in the playoffs that I just don't think comparisons are fair. But
again, and I bring it up every time.
Mm-hmm.
I bring it up every time because every once in a while I have to pat myself on the back.
Sure.
Preseason, 2011, they will not be a favorite, but I will not be surprised if the Kings win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
So.
But this final, and it only occurred to me last night around halfway through the second period, I think. In 2014, same Kings organization, different year, Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final, overtime. Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final, double overtime. Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final, 3-0 win over the Rangers. Now this was not a 3-0, and what was it, 6-1 last night. it's a different kind of blowout, but same thing where games 1 and 2, you go, wow, these are razor thin margins, right? We're
Yes.
talking about 3 overtime periods. And then game 3, all of a sudden, one team takes a commanding lead. Now, the difference there was that the Kings had a 3-0 lead in the series and Florida only has a 2-1 lead over Edmonton. But we saw
Jesse, the way I look at it, again, I hate to, I don't hate to interrupt. It fit the formula.
Mm-hmm.
Period number 1 of both games 1 and 2 and 14 against the Rangers. The Rangers dominated the first period. They outskated. They were fat. Oh, as the game goes along, the Kings get a piece of you. They get another piece of you. They wear you down. They wear you down. Before you know it, they're taking over the game. So that was the formula, and the formula worked.
And as we saw in game 3 last night, and I mean, I haven't heard from the Oilers. I assume they probably wouldn't concede this, but I saw a lot of Oilers fans saying, yeah, they lost their composure. That's not how the Edmonton Oilers like to play. Florida got under their skin, and that played and that was the sort of key to the Kings in those years, right? Was just maintain your composure, let your opponent freak out, let them do something.
Yeah, but and I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was listening to the broadcast, Eddie Olczyk, but at 4-1, it's still a game.
Sure.
You get the next one, it's 4-2, and then you're in pull the goaltender situation if it goes down to the end of the game down by 2. But 5-1 and 6-1, it happened exactly the way I thought it would. And again, I'd like to see more of that from the Kings when they get behind in games like that. Where, you know what, there were some, you could tell there was some attempt dangers there last night where you're cross-checking a guy right in the wrist, like where the pads aren't. You're attacking certain areas. But at the same time, I expect that. Again, that game late in the regular season in Edmonton when the Kings had a pretty decent lead late and Nurse jumps on Byfield, but I kind of expected that. That's what happens. But yeah, I think early on, all those penalties that we're taking, I mean, geez, that was loss of composure. Yes. But the end with all the scraps and the fights, and that to me was normal based on a 5-1, 6-1 score.
This is one of the reasons that I find it difficult to watch the playoffs immediately after the Kings are eliminated, assuming they make it, because if I watch, I didn't watch the second round because I know that I'm just going to be rooting against Edmonton, right? Like this is just how I'm wired. And so I'm not going to have any objective ability to enjoy or evaluate what's happening. I'm just going to want them to lose. And if they win, I'm going to come up with some sort of crazy theory about how they cheat and they flop. And, they don't have any good players. They're just bums. And then, of course, if the team makes it to the Stanley Cup Final, then here I am in game 3, just, loving Florida, trouncing them. But, games 1 and 2 were more nerve-wracking than they should be, given that I theoretically don't care who wins.
Okay, well, I mean, theoretically, I do.
Well, no, I want Edmonton to lose. I don't care who wins. I care who loses. I want Edmonton to lose.
When Marchand scored in overtime in game 2, I mean, I jumped off the bed. I was like, okay, this is, and it's probably as much a sign of respect as anything else for Edmonton, but it's also the heartache of 4 in a row.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's only going to get worse as the summer goes on. What I find really fascinating is prior to the start of the Stanley Cup Final, there are some players on both teams who are going to be unrestricted free agents, on July 1st. And the conversation is, well, what are these players worth when that day comes? And worth, 3 games changes a guy's theoretical price tag from, 8 or 9 to 13. And all of a sudden, and I'll just throw out a name, Sam Bennett, right? Who I like very much. And I thought was underrated for years, him and Reinhart. When Florida got both of them, I was upset. But you look at the price tag and you go, okay, well, it's one thing to have that guy at 4.5. It's another thing to have that guy at double digits. It does change the math. And I find it fascinating that a lot of people have gone from, not worth that much. Like, great player, would love to have him, but not worth that much, to then, one shift, even not just one game, one shift. And I'm seeing people on social media saying, like, back up the Brinks truck, or Marchand, for example,
Yeah, well, for Sam Bennett, to me, most everyone knew his value. Now, if you're placing, new contract, unrestricted, all that, if I'm a team that's rebuilding, I'm not going after Bennett,
No,
not to pay him that much money. He's
right.
not that type of player,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion. He's not that type of player that, you build around, and he's a pillar. But now if you get him to a good team and you're knocking on the door for a Stanley Cup, then I'm going 11. I'll go 11 for him. If I'm a team, now if you're a team like that already, right, you're probably up against the cap already because you have good players assembled. But I think there's a big difference because his regular season numbers are not off the charts. He plays the same way, but obviously his style and his physicality make him more valuable in the playoffs. But, having said that, again, I go the premium for him if I'm already a solid team who thinks they have a chance, as opposed to bringing him in to a rebuilding team and having him there as that veteran that's going to lead. Then I don't think the numbers at 10 and 11 match up to his value.
I'd like to make one minor correction to what you said about Sam Bennett. You said you thought everybody knew his value. I'm not sure Brad Treliving did.
There you go.
He's the one who traded.
Yes,
but I think everybody else did.
No, he left. Where did he go? Where did he start?
Calgary.
He did start in Calgary. Okay,
yeah.
So that's because the Sams, right?
Yeah.
Reinhart and Bennett, they started off Buffalo, Calgary, and now look at them. They're yeah. But again, Sam Bennett would not jump off the board at you, right? He would not. Sam Reinhart probably catches your eye more than Bennett because of the skill that he has, the hands, the finish. And then you see Bennett on the breakaway last night. That's a pretty good finish.
Yeah, no, that whole shift, though. I mean, knocks down two guys in the defensive zone.
Exactly.
Wheels around and heads the opposite direction, takes that pass at the red line, the blue line, and is all alone for. Yeah, no, it was an incredible game. It's been a fun series.
Yeah, it has. Yeah,
I just, it just hurts because I don't know how far the Kings would have gone if they had beaten Edmonton, but we'll never know, and that's the part that's difficult. Anyway, let's talk about the Kings because this is, in theory, a Kings podcast. And we're going to wrap up our evaluation. We're talking about the top line, and I'm still not sure what order I want to go in with the three guys. So I think I'm just going to go in terms of seniority, and I think we're just going to start with Anze Kopitar, the captain.
So it's going to be Kopitar, Kempe, and Marner, right? That's
not quite. No. Okay. But we are going to start with Anze Kopitar, who started out with, putting up numbers that looked incredible and then trailed off and then picked up again late in the season. So at this point in Kopitar's career, how reliant, how reliant is he on line mates to get points, I guess is where I'm going with this.
Jesse, I think you're hitting the nail. I think he is now. I think he used to drive the boat, the ship, drive the bus. Now he needs a little bit more help. And when Kuzmenko joined, man, he took off. Keep in mind, he was with LaFerriere early.
Who was on a hot pace to start.
Yeah, and that just the clicking. So I think the chemistry is more important for Anze now than it was in the past. And I think a big reason, although I think the drop-off in January is normal for him, right? It's kind of one of those, then you have to take his age into consideration, all those things. But I'm going the way you're going more, and that is I think chemistry and line combination mean more to him now than it did earlier on.
I'm going to step way outside of my lane right now. One of my favorite conversations, I've said this a number of times, I love listening to people talk about basketball far more than I like watching basketball, mainly because I don't know anything about basketball. So when I listen to people talk about basketball, I don't have any opinions. I can just listen to it and go, oh, okay, that guy's the best? Sure, if you say so. Whereas if I listen to 32 Thoughts, I'm just yelling at my phone the whole time going, well, how could you think that? How could you think that? Anyway, one of my favorite conversations is the idea that LeBron James, is, if not the best basketball player of all time, certainly one of the best basketball players of all time. But because he's so good and because he has such a high IQ and he, can see things that other people can't, he has oversized influence on his teams. So he is not necessarily the best judge of how he ought to be used or employed, but he thinks he is because he's LeBron James. And even if he's only 95% correct on his assessments, it'll work out more often than not. But there's this question of like, well, what might his career have looked like had he just sacrificed that, control over his career? What if he had decided 10 years ago, okay, I'm going to do what the coaches want. I'm going to do what the GM wants. I'm not going to insist on my players, my guys. The Russell Westbrook trade would be the big example. Like, nobody understood that one. He came to LA. Anyway, it's not a basketball show.
No, but I would just say, Jess, it's a little bit of apples and oranges there.
Okay.
So in basketball, 1 to 2, 3 players can dominate a team, dominate the floor time, and dominate the attempts. It just seems to, you're pigeonholed more in those areas where in hockey, yes, you have role definement, you have skill types, you have all that, but there is probably more of a core of 8 to 9 players as opposed to 2 to 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you saw where I was going with that in that, there was an interview. I think it was either last exit interviews or the start of training camp this year. I've tried to go back and find it and I can't. Where Kopitar was asked about minutes reductions, and not just minutes reductions, but, specific minute, like, should you kill fewer penalties? And I think his answer was something along the lines of, if I'm playing, I want the pressure. If I'm going to be out there, I want to matter, which I totally understand, right? Like that.
I think the biggest adjustment for him or biggest challenge for him will be if the numbers do go down as far as time on ice.
Mm-hmm.
Does that leave him stagnant on the bench to a point where he's there too long, not used to that? And then when he gets out there, he can't find a way to be as effective because he's cold. Mm-hmm. He's not warm. He's not going every other shift, every third, not every penalty kill, not every power play, all those things. So that would be, to me, his biggest adjustment. We see that in hockey in the best-on-best competitions when your fourth-line center normally gets 21 minutes in the NHL, and in the best-on-best Olympics or something, he's getting 12 minutes. But he's still able to get out there. Now, and again, when you're in the best-on-best competitions, and by the way, I like where our conversation's going. It's good. I like this general, a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, in the best-on-best, you're only in a 2-week tournament.
Right.
You're not in an 82-game schedule. So you can learn to defer. You can learn to take less because it's only 2 weeks. 82 games, sitting on the bench, that's a little bit more difficult to handle. So a lot of things going on there. But yeah, I think that Anze, he's still in the, I don't know, drive the bus, but he's in the front seat. But it's probably time for someone else to just jump over him a little bit.
So then this sort of brings me to another curiosity I have about, and this question isn't even about Kopitar. It's about the entire offseason, but I don't know how else to work it in. When Todd McClellan was relieved of his duties, he gave an interview shortly after where he was asked about Pierre-Luc Dubois and integrating him into the team. And he used a phrase that caught my ear, and I've been obsessed with it ever since I heard it. And he was talking about, he was having praise for Pierre-Luc Dubois, I should add that. But he said, LA do things differently. They have a different priority. And he kept referring to LA as a separate entity from himself, which caught my ear because, he was the coach for 5 years, more or less. And he didn't say we. He didn't say we did things differently. We demanded defense and checking. We did this and we did that. It was very distinct they, right? Identifying a culture that he joined. That's how I heard it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And, we talked to McClellan and Rob Blake at various times over the years about the 1-3-1, and we were told the 1-3-1 was adopted. It was a decision organizationally based on talent at the time. And then over time, talent was acquired to fit the system that had been. So it became sort of a, chicken or egg situation, or a snake eating its tail. And you go, well, where does this start? How does it, whatever. So if Kopitar isn't going to be the driver of the bus, even if he's, even if he's wearing even if he's training Byfield, right? Even if he's standing right next to him in the well, there on the front of the bus.
Yeah.
Does the route change? Does the shape of the bus change at all? Because Anze Kopitar plays a very specific game. And to be fair, he's played it so well. He'll be in the Hall of Fame. He'll have a number retired. Like, he's an incredible player with an incredible career. And it's not over, right? Like, it wouldn't stun me if he signed an extension. I'm not expecting it, but it wouldn't stun me if he said, I got 3 or 4 more years left in me.
If you went to we talked about it last time, I think we chatted, where, the third line is the defining line of a team.
Mm-hmm.
The last 10 years, the NHL's third lines have been oh man, you got that line as your third line, you're going to win. You're going to be close. You're going to be right there. So does he drop down that far? I don't think that happens this year, but what happens if he did sign an extension and he came in at 15 and a half minutes a night? And all he's expected to do what Jordan Staal does right now, which is take faceoffs, kill penalties, and lean on you. And his offense is not expected. None. Still probably a pretty valuable asset there.
I would think so.
So but again, then you're really, now his mindset changes. How does he stay involved in a game? Like I was saying earlier, how do you stay warm to jump over the boards, after sitting for 6 minutes? That's a tough challenge, but a lot of players do it.
There was also a moment, my fear was that we were going to range all over the line and lose all sorts of structure. And now here I am, the one who's about to do it. There was a quote from Kuzmenko about his defensive game improvement upon joining the Kings. And he talked about not wanting to get a dirty look from Anze Kopitar.
Yes.
Which was, frankly, I think the first time in Anze Kopitar's very long career that I've heard a teammate specifically reference his influence in that way, right? We hear all the positives. We hear, he's a legend. He sets the example. He's a pro. He's, we hear all the good stuff, but I've never heard anything close to a Mark Messier type, he could kill you with his looks kind of thing. But I mean, that just goes to show you how highly he's held in regard by his peers.
Yes. By a guy who's relatively new to the league, relatively young, just compared to his, his NHL experience, yet he knows exactly everything about Anze Kopitar, and he knows what he's going to do, and he knows. I could imagine Kopi's look being less of a sneer and more of a kind of a laugh it off. He'd look at the guy and go, kind of chuckle and go and shake his head no, like not with the way we do it, that type of thing, as opposed to, putting a guy up against the wall and saying, if you don't change, you're not
right.
But hey, I mean, Anze he's the guy.
Yeah.
And we want him to be overtaken, not because he's falling off that much, but because other guys are getting better. That's what we want. In all fairness, at his age, though, you can't keep expecting to get what he's giving. And having said all of this conversation, we're talking about, he's on the back 9, he's on the back 3, he's at near the end. And I know I hear some comments out there, and valid. But I also remember 2 Stanley Cups. And I remember in playoff series where, Quickie is the MVP and he should be. And Williams is the MVP and he should be. But who's the best player throughout the whole playoffs? Anze Kopitar.
Yeah.
And, it was great comment the other night. They were asking Paul Maurice after 2 games, Alexander Barkov is -2. He said, yeah, we're going to trade him. you know who those guys are out there against? Yeah, I know they're minus, and he's on the ice for 2 goals against, but he's out there with McDavid all the time. And you know what? 2 goals against with McDavid, you hold him to 2 every night, you're doing your job.
Yeah, exactly, which is insane.
That's where those value things come in, and that's where numbers get skewed. But and that's where Anze, what you said about Kuzmenko is great, Jesse, because if you look at Anze's numbers throughout the years, they're not right. They're not off the board. You add them all up, and yes, they're phenomenal. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, no question. Not even an issue. But I think he's that guy that players just go, man, if I could play with him, it would make it a lot easier.
There's the whole cliche of the parent saying, "I'm not mad, I'm disappointed." That's how I imagine Anze Kopitar's looks are, where you're not like.
Right, yeah.
You're not scared that you're not scared of upsetting him. You're scared of disappointing him because the standard has been set so high.
I could imagine being Jesse's looking across going, if you didn't know by now, this is the way we play.
Yeah.
Then,
yeah.
So
let's talk about Adrian Kempe. I was texting with
somebody. One of my favorites.
Yeah. Well, I was texting with somebody last night about Game 3. And, we were just doing the thing of like, who from this Kings roster could you drop into one of these teams and they wouldn't skip a beat. And Adrian Kempe was the name I think that we sort of came up with. And I said in the conversation that I kind of chuckled when Luc Robitaille was asked if, you need a superstar to win. And he said, well, we have a superstar. It's Adrian Kempe. And the reason I chuckled is not because I don't think that Adrian Kempe isn't an excellent hockey player. It's a language thing, not a hockey thing. Like, I just think superstar to me means if he was walking down the street and bumped into my 80-year-old mother who doesn't watch hockey, does my mother know who Adrian Kempe is? And the answer is absolutely not. But there's nothing to do with how good he is at hockey. Adrian Kempe has become, I don't know, does he have a weakness in his game right now?
Yeah, it's not there. It's not, skate fast, quick enough, but powerful. Great shot, good physicality with and without the puck. With the puck, physicality is driving to the net, making defenders defend and expend energy. Physicality without the puck, that's easier to define, running guys into the boards, angling them off, knocking them off puck, loose puck battles, those things. So he does that. He does all of that at a high level. Plays on the power play, plays on the penalty kill. And again, I go back to his playoffs where I think he just really, he shows that. And your point to, playing in the series that's going on now, he would not miss a beat. He would love that physicality.
I mean, there was the quote, I think it was McClellan who said he plays his best hockey when the other team looks like they're mad at him. And this is, look, it's a silly, very small sample size, but the fact that he has been, when called upon, literally played defense and had that hip check at center ice. Was it against Columbus last season, I think?
Yeah.
Or maybe it was against the Ducks. I can't remember.
Yes.
Yeah, against Vetrano.
In Anaheim.
Yeah.
He had another one too, though. He had another one.
Like that. I mean.
You don't see it. Very few players are given that responsibility, to do that. And he's one of the guys that the coaches trust, and they put him in that situation. And then just when you think he's going to back off, he stands up and gives you the old hip.
Mm-hmm. And, all strengths, right? Penalty kill, power play, overtime, can pass, can shoot, he's just, it's a short evaluation because I just don't know what else he could do. And, and then was it this season he started wearing a letter, or was it last season when guys are out of the lineup on occasion? He winds up with an A on his jersey. I mean, and not that anybody who doesn't go into the locker room cares about this, but if you ask him a question in a post-game scrum or post-practice scrum, is there anybody who stops and listens harder to what you actually asked and tries to give you a better answer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's just great. I just can't say enough lovely things about Adrian Kempe.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of my favorites, if not,
Right.
I mean, I've always been a Drew Doughty fan, just over the years, and just the way his approach to the game. And my wife and I go back and forth. Drew is my favorite, and Andrei was her favorite. We go back and forth, and now I think Adrian's kind of
Yeah.
taking over that pedestal.
I mean, he's only playing 10 seconds more a game than Anze Kopitar.
Right.
But the fact that he is the, leading minutes player amongst forwards on the team, I think is significant, even if it is just the tiniest margin over Anze Kopitar.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm still not entirely sure that I love the two of them as a pair as much as the organization does. But when you find the right third wheel with them, it clearly works, right? Like, I have not liked some combinations of players they have chosen to go with
right.
Kopitar and Kempe as the sort of core pair. But when you add Kuzmenko, and I guess we can use this to sort of soft transition into talking about Kuzmenko, like, one of my concerns about the conversations last year at the trade deadline was they need a guy to play with Kopitar and Kempe, and they're going to do this and they're going to do that, and blah, blah, blah. And I never really loved the Iafallo Kopitar Kempe trio. There were times this season where I didn't think the pairing necessarily worked as well as, it was expected to. So when they brought in Kuzmenko, I was like, yeah, well, we'll see. But then for whatever reason, those three guys, it took 5 games or 6 games for them to sort it out. But once they sorted it out, I mean, they were great.
Yeah, there's what we were talking about with Andrei before. There's the chemistry piece that fit.
Mm-hmm.
That came in, got to loose pucks, able to change the point of attack very quickly, tight space quickness, tight space hands, hang around the front of the net. So he kind of allowed Kopi to patrol the ice, and Kuzmenko would do a lot of those other little things. Then you put him on the power play, right-hand shot for the Kings setup, attacks the seams a little bit better, finds seams with passes or shots. But just that overall, maybe that quickness more than anything, that added to Kopitar and Kempe, I think, did the job with Kuzmenko joining in. I like, his loose puck battle, great. He was in there for pucks. It wasn't like he's on the outside. And again, the fit, as I'm talking, who's right-handed, who's quick, who sees the ice? Mitch Marner, okay. So he does all of that. He probably doesn't have the loose puck battle that Kuzmenko does. So you're looking at that type of player, and Kuzi really fit it. He really fit in there. That was a chemistry thing. And I'm if it didn't work ultimately as far as the playoffs and what went on there, but if the Kings pro scouting staff was looking for a fit, they found a fit. And we just don't know now if it's going to be able to be continued.
How much of this is, and look, this is one of those things that I think I might be the only person who cares as much as I do about it, so apologies to the whole world, but how much of this is, how interesting is it to you that Kuzmenko is a right-hand shot who plays the left side and Kempe is a left-hand shot who plays the right side?
Yeah, it's normal now.
Yeah.
But I think the fit on the right-handed shot was more on the power play, and then it just transferred to the 5-on-5. That's what it was too. And I know we've touched on it before, Jesse, but with Kuzmenko, again, the stage of his career. We talked last time about Fiala. He had to figure it out. He's at that age now. While Kuzmenko, 4 teams, 3 years, moving around, bouncing around. Is he willing to adjust his game and commit to a little bit more without the puck effort and energy expansion? I think he did that. And so, and maybe part of that is he finding a home somewhere instead of bouncing around all the time, instead of finding ways to wear out his welcome, to do things that, goes against the team system, coach's preference. He found himself bouncing around, and I think he was trying to make an argument for himself when he joined the Kings that I'm tired of that. I'm at that stage of my career where I need to do something to solidify and be more reliable. And he did that. the sample size was not what you would want. You'd want to see over a full season or 2 or 3, but for the most part, he did what was expected and probably more.
For me, it was the game against Winnipeg on April 1st, 4-1 win, where he had those plays in the neutral zone, where he, just stripped the puck off a guy and went the other way, and it was a goal for the Kings. And you went, I didn't know, right? Like I knew he had the shot. I knew he had this, the skating. I knew that he was here for the, power play and all this, but I didn't know that he had the ability, or the determination, I guess would be the right word, whatever you want to attribute to what you're just saying about wanting to find a home and prove himself. And I can't remember how shortly after that, the comment, I think it might've been after that game where he made the comment about not wanting to disappoint Anze Kopitar and having to adjust his game in that regard. But, there were moments, I think was it a goal that he scored or maybe he assisted, but I think it was Kempe, Gavrikov, and Kuzmenko who scored a goal where the puck went from one board to the far right circle and in the net.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden you saw this creativity and this east-west movement that just wasn't there before.
Yeah. The improvement in the Kings counterattack transition game. Mm-hmm. I thought the last half of the season was really good improvement again, because we knew they could defend. We talked about it many times. Are they expending so much energy defending that they can't go on offense? And that's why the goals are down. But then the balance went through since the trade deadline. I think the Kings were the second highest scoring team in the league. Those types of so, there you go with improvement, and the improvement was in that area. And you need that area. As good as Florida is, right? They're big and they're strong and they defend well. But when they get the puck, they can be dangerous too.
Yeah.
And that's the change that happened with the Kings. Unfortunately, they couldn't carry that through 60 minutes games in the playoffs, but that's something to be worked on.
And even if you're going up against a team like Florida that can defend, I think it was it the overtime goal in game 1 where Perry dishes it behind him and McDavid picks it up and sends it. Was it Dry? I think I have the goal right in my head. Perry to McDavid to Draisaitl on the far side. And it's just like, okay, you can be as defensively sound as you want, but when you have a team that can transfer the puck from a puck carrier facing the wrong way, to the goal scorer on the opposite side of the net within less than 2 seconds.
Yeah.
It's tough to defend against that.
It brings out the point to me that some defenses and some mindsets work against most, but they're not going to work against him.
Right.
And I'm talking, Draisaitl doesn't get to go, okay, you plan your game on McDavid because and I feel better about myself now when I was commentating, because I was getting sick of myself saying how good McDavid was and pointing, but then you see him now and you go, well, you have to.
Yeah.
I know there were people like my friends and family up in Canada when Tiger Woods was in his prime, and they're Canadian, they're not American. We're sick and tired of hearing about Tiger. Those announcers, well, you know what? Those announcers are just telling you what it is. You're talking about all-time greats. And, we're seeing that, and we're seeing that now. It's getting to the point where, the great comments the other day by Ekblad about the goal, the pass he made to Draisaitl, and he said, the walk on water, pull and drag, and he just went, Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's what he is. But, we'll just continue to try to find a way, and that's, maybe we'll kind of wind down our conversation now about where we started, where the opportunity was there.
Yeah.
And it just...
Well, that's why I think this offseason is going to be so fascinating, is that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we have a new general manager.
Yeah.
We've got a team that, and I've said this for the last few seasons now, I think there are some teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs put themselves in a position, or I won't use Toronto, I'll use Washington. The Capitals reached a point at some point a few years before they won the Cup where, because Ovechkin had had a career as long as he had, the conversation simply became, okay, nobody cares what he does in the regular season anymore, right? We know he's good. We know he's going to score a bajillion goals. Now it's, if they don't make it out of the first round, is this just, well, one more year of that, And the Kings have put themselves in that conversation, not because of, they've been in the playoffs for 10 years in a row and they can't get out, but because 2 years ago they kind of announced, hey, this is where we want to be going. This is where we think we are. And so now, like realistically, we have an 82 game season coming up where I'll watch, I'll pay attention, I will have opinions, you and I will talk, many times, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, I think you and I both know that we're going to be looking, it'll depend what happens in the playoffs. And, it's hard to evaluate regular season, trends and success and moves when you're just looking for a very brief, short series. And you just go like, sheesh.
Yeah. And I used to be Jess, and I used to be, you got to be bad to be good. It's the window is either go for it or rebuild. I'm not much of an in-between guy, but I think that's where the Kings find themselves now, and just trying to get that last little. And I think, it is probably a good example this year that if you do get by the first round, then you have a chance. A lot of people thought Dallas was going to beat Edmonton. A lot of people thought Vegas was going to beat it. Well, you know what? They got their players back at the right time, right? Perhaps this year, well, not this year, but the new collective bargaining agreement, you won't be able to, let's say, hide players as much as they can now. That Evander Kane coming back without playing regular season basically is one of those where doesn't hurt your cap, but comes to, those things might be ended, and that's fine. Hey, I'm all for them doing that. That's what the rules are. You use the rules as good as you can. You maximize that as much as you can. But that's, it's. I'm interested too, Jesse, because what you said with Ken Holland taking over, and it's a new set of eyes, a new set of, Blakey. Again, Blakey's last year was an all-star year as a GM. I mean, he pushed all the right buttons, no question. But it's something new. It's something, maybe part of the reason, again, Blakey said we had 4 years, we didn't win. I'm going to take responsibility. Now we have someone with new, fresh set of eyes on it. And maybe that's all it'll take, right? Maybe that's all it'll be, that little piece comes somewhere.
Listen, I know everybody listening would love that. I certainly would.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
Two final thoughts. One, the Florida Panthers, I don't know if this matters or will make a difference in how people approach roster construction, but what do they have? 3 players that they drafted, and the rest are free agents, trades, and waiver claimees. Like they've skipped the typical build models that most teams have. And then backtracking to your point about, Canadian versus American broadcasters and the Tiger Woods thing, my dad and I have, a shorthand, as most people in their families do. And the one story that we can both start to tell that we know exactly where the other one's going with it is in 2007, his whole family lives in Ottawa. And so my uncle was just constantly trying to tell us how the Senators were going to steamroll the Ducks. And we kept shaking our head and going, you don't know, man. You have no idea. You do not know what's coming. And he was like, oh, what do you guys know? This is Ottawa versus Anaheim. Anaheim won. We were like, geez, you are in for a rude awakening, Larry. And he was. So there you go. All right, Jim, thank you very much as always for joining me. Appreciate it, joining me. And we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great chat. Thank you.